Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Not necessarily Dungeons and Dragons 5e, could be any version of Dungeons and Dragons, could be a role-play game, but really this is about gaining attention. The first thing, this is the question for today and topic, getting your Dungeons and Dragons players' attention. It's one of the things that most Dungeon Masters have to deal with at some point in their career or the time they spend as a Dungeon Master. So how do you do it? I want to start off with just quickly just covering why people get distracted and then give you some practical tools that I have used myself and a few other people that I know have used. And I'm going to give you sort of a rundown roughly of sort of how successful they were or what to expect from using them. Okay, so Dungeons and Dragons players can get distracted for many reasons. I want to just cover roughly, I would say, 9 different reasons that I know of. The first one is dealing with the nerd talk. That's the off-topic discussions that take place about Lord of the Rings, sci-fi stuff, and anything else they can think of. I have a friend who likes to talk about history, can't help himself, it's sort of his passion, and therefore we wind up with a lot of discussion around that. I've already done a video on how to deal with off-topic discussions if you're interested. Number 2 would be the horseplay and the goofing off, because usually Dungeons and Dragons about a time to get together and just blow off steam. So often you'll get a lot of people who will goof off, tell a few jokes, and just generally try to have fun. And that can go on for quite a long time. Certainly number 3 with the technology that we have today, that's the electronic devices at the table. That's your cell phone, your laptops, your tablets, and every other thing you can possibly think of that somebody might be able to bring to the table that's portable. And a lot of people have brought a lot of different devices to tables over the years. This is one that usually gets a lot of people's goat, and that is the spotlight hogs. This is the person who hogs the spotlight. It has to be all about them, and they have just decided that you've provided them with an audience. Yay! And now they are going to give you everything they can possibly think of because they now have a captured audience sitting at the table. Number 5 would be the poor social graces. This is the Beavis and Butthead experience. We know what we're talking about. There are various versions of the Beavis and Butthead players. These are people who just don't know how to communicate with people in any kind of forum and seem to have lost any sort of ability to communicate in a gentile manner. Then you've got a few players that are just bored. Now, when I talk about boredom, just because a player is bored is not necessarily a reflection of the Dungeon Master and what they are doing. Sometimes it's just all about the player and they've decided to go into a bathroom and paint the wall or whatever else they can think of just because they have nothing better to do. But it usually involves picking up electronic devices or just wandering off or just not showing up. But usually if they're not showing up, it's not quite as distracting as having them at the table doing something else. Number 7 would be the not socially active enough during the week. For whatever reason, this person is a hermit crab and has spent most of their time communicating through electronic devices, computers, but not with real people, and therefore suddenly they are now got a group of people around them and they just need to unload. They need to have some sort of social connection and they just can't stop themselves. They've been deprived so much. Number 8 is the legitimate life or real life emergencies. So yes, when the house is burning down, it is perfectly reasonable that your players will be distracted and therefore be picking up their phone and trying to figure out what to do next and running out the door and rushing around in a panic or whatever it is that might be happening. Or it might have to do with the kids, because often when it comes to real life emergencies, it's usually around what's going on with the kids, right? Number 9 is very common for a lot of people, and that is the personal life stress, whether that be problems at work, family, bills, debt, everything you can imagine, personal health. These can impact on somebody and distract them when they're playing the game. Now, I would say that the last 2, so your emergencies and your personal life stress, are those sorts of aspects that you should sort of be pretty lenient with. And also, when I'm talking about how to get a Dungeons & Dragons player attention, I would like to point out that my advice does not go as far as giving you advice on how to deal with family members and friends. That is a different story. You are an adult. You have to make the decision yourself. Talking to somebody and taking somebody else's advice on the internet who has no idea of the situation you're dealing with is not wise. It's like talking to somebody who has nothing to lose. Essentially, they've got nothing to lose with regard to the relationship you have with your family or friends. So I would like to point out, don't take advice when it comes to those sorts of things. If it's people you don't really know, it's a very different story. Okay, let's start off with, how does a Dungeon Master get their players' attention when they are trying to run the Dungeons & Dragons game? I would like to point out, this is not so much a prevention. This video is about dealing with intervention. We're intercepting the problem. We're not trying to avoid the problem. So I'm not talking about trying to make your game more interesting so that they pay attention. That's prevention. What I'm talking about is intervention, which is a different thing again. Okay, so number one, ask your players to focus on you. That's the Dungeon Master. And I don't suggest that you sit down there and beg like a dog. Okay, that have some dignity, but simply asking them to just focus on you, bring the conversation and their attention back to the game and the Dungeon Master so you can start talking. Often this will look like somebody interrupting you. You're trying to speak as a Dungeon Master and somebody will get distracted and sort of try to talk over the top of you. Okay, number two is when you're dealing with off-topic discussions, engage in that off-topic discussion deliberately, trying to become the center focus for the off-topic discussion, and then pull your group back into the game session. It's the easiest way to deal with off-topic discussions, I find. All right, number three I found useful over the years, and that is to simply stand up at the game table. Now, whether you decide to stand the entire time during your game session, if you are tough enough and strong enough and energetic enough to stand at the table the whole time, go for it. But just standing up from a sitting position brings the focus onto you. I don't suggest that you start dancing on the table. Rackwell Welch is an expert, and who knows how strong your table is, whether it can support your weight when you start to jump on there and dance around. Okay, let's deal with number three. This is a little bit of the prevention side of things, but I want to use it like an intervention, and that is, number four is present something crazy in your Dungeons & Dragons game. All it needs to be is a sentence or two, and say it loudly. Don't say it quietly. Speak up. Let people hear you. So I think of Rick and Morty and Fawlty Towers, a lot of British comedies. So do something crazy, out of the ordinary, something that you wouldn't necessarily have put in your game that you know will surprise your players. I've talked about developing surprise and storytelling in another video, so that's kind of related to this. Another technique that I have used, and that's number five, is put out a battle map and monster miniatures and just start a combat. Don't explain yourself, just put out the miniatures, and then they'll start asking questions and you'll say, a purple worm showed up, roll initiative, there's a battle. They don't have to have any context for it whatsoever. If you feel you must, that's fine, that's up to you. But my suggestion is, lay it out, don't say anything. Number six is dress up in costume to attract your players' awe. Now the great thing about dressing up in costume, as we know, there's a lot of people who like cosplay, LARPing. Here I've got a picture of Matt Mercer. Now you can be guaranteed that Matt Mercer has probably got everybody's attention for the entire session, not just the single situation you're dealing with. You might find that dressing up in costume at your table will give you a lot of prevention and intervention for the entire session. It won't be just a single situation. I've found that really useful. One of the techniques that I like a lot. Number seven is wear an unusual hat. As the cat is wearing an unusual hat, it's worked for me for years. I wear a hat when I'm dungeon mastering, and for some reason everybody is sort of always confused by the reason, why am I wearing a hat at the table? it suddenly becomes the discussion focus, which means I am now the center of the focus for when I need it to be, and I can drive the table in the direction that I need to when we're starting to play the game. If you like to use music, this is number 8. Play atmospheric music that you have in the background very loudly, like so loud people cannot talk over it, and then turn it down when the players are focused on you, the dungeon master, because you were controlling the knob, right? You're the one who was turning the knob and making it so loud. I'm not suggesting that you turn it up and cause them to have their ears bleed, but turn it up nice and loud. Number 9, tell a funny joke. If you want to get somebody's attention, the best way to do that is to tell a funny joke. Robin Williams is an expert in the area. I don't expect that you be a Robin Williams, but let's get real. People like jokes. Just don't tell a dad joke. Tell like a good joke if you can help it. Number 10, slam that book down on the table. Find the biggest, heaviest book you can and just bang it down on the table. I would like to point out that we are now entering the zone where things have got out of control and you really aren't able to control the table. Okay? Only thing to remember is hang on to the book. Don't let it go. Okay? If you wind up with the book flying out of your hands and walloping somebody in the head, you certainly will have got their attention, but you may have knocked them out, and also too caused a whole lot of trauma and problems at the table as well. So the only intention is to slam the book on the table, not into somebody's face. Number 11, and that is, as I said, we are now entering the zone of we are out of control and the table cannot be brought back to you without doing something extreme, and that is say shut up as loud as you can. Now, sometimes you don't need to say it loud. Sometimes you're dealing with somebody who's quite a passive individual, and so just telling them to shut up if they continue to talk when you've asked them to stop talking and you've tried all these other techniques, then this can be sort of done by just saying it quietly. I would like to point out, when it comes to saying shut up, which I have used at my table, it doesn't go down well. That's one of the big consequences of doing that, is it never goes down well with players. They're always offended, even if they should be shutting up, and it doesn't always work, but it can work sometimes. I have had people who I've said, look, you need to just shut up, and they've told me, no, I'm not going to shut up, this is far more interesting, I'm going to talk about this. Seriously, that's happened at my table. I know what it's like, so if you've experienced it, yeah, it does happen. Okay, let's deal with number 12. Ask that distracted or distracting player to leave the table till they are ready to play the game. That's right, you pull out the red card and flag them. This is hard to do with, as I said, hard to do with somebody who's a family or friends. Even I'm saying shut up, that's always difficult, okay, when you're dealing with family and friends, because you're crossing a boundary that is established. Okay, number 13 is ban the use of electronic devices at your table. If that's the problem, ban them. But good luck to you. This is the age of technology where everybody seems to want to use a cell phone or laptops or tablets. Don't grab the phone, chuck it in the toilet and flush it, okay? Probably not, you'll get their attention, but it won't go down well. All right, next one. Pick up your gear and go home. Yes, I've done this twice. The first time, I literally packed up my gear, people were not going to quiet down, and I just went home. It was a rough deal for me. I felt really bad about it. Every time you do this, every time you wind up having to ask somebody to leave the table, or packing up your gear in particular and going home, as ET has gone home, phone home, go home. Look, you always look like the bad guy. It always comes off as you are the one who's overreacted. But there are situations where you're just wasting your time. And of course you could just stick around and just let them talk and then go off and do something else or just join in. But if you don't want to do that and you just want to be there to play the game, then just pack up your gear and go home. The second time I did it, it shocked my players so much. They were highly offended, and the end result for me was a lot of people never messed around with me ever again, and a couple of people left. They were easily replaced in my case, but you can be guaranteed that some people will be offended by this. One of the great things about peer pressure that we knew about in school is it works effectively. So never underestimate, this is your last one, this is your last intervention, never underestimate the power of peer pressure. That's the other players at the table who are not distracting and not getting distracted. As a dungeon master, enlist their help. Get them to help control and manage the table. It should not just be down to the dungeon master to manage adults' behavior and even teenagers. You know, you're on the cusp of becoming young adults. There is some sort of contract and decorum required when you enter into a group. It's not a free-for-all party, unless of course there's alcohol involved, then maybe it is. Look, that's my advice to you. As I've said before, if you're dealing with family and friends, you need to be very careful about implementing any of these techniques, because I'm not going to provide you with advice around that. You as an adult have to make that final decision yourself. If you found this video useful, great. There's another video called telling good stories, or telling great Dungeons and Dragons stories, which is kind of related to this video, so I suggest checking that out if you're interested. If you are interested in my content, I have advice for players and dungeon masters, just general advice and rules advice if you are interested. If you want to support the channel so I keep doing stuff like this, then you can check me out on Patreon. I have affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon down in the description. I have a merchandise shelf underneath all of my videos. Make sure to share, like and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.